Welcome to Where is Remote Research Going? I'm Max, a senior design researcher and strategist at Reckitt. I report into research and development for the hygiene side of our business, and I'm tasked with future-proofing our brands. Today's talk is inspired by my experience working in front-end innovation research during the COVID-19 pandemic. I used to be found in the field, bringing R&D and marketing teams into consumers' homes around the world. And now I'm more easily reachable, conducting qualitative research and facilitating workshops from the comfort of my living room. Today's talk will be sectioned into 4 parts. What happened to face-to-face research? We'll cover how did teams respond, and what is replacing it? Where is remote research going? We'll cover the questions teams should ask themselves to determine what a hybrid in-person and remote research model should look like for your organization. For the How Do We Get There segment, we'll provide 3 provocations to inspire your teams to strengthen your remote research capability, regardless of if you've just demoed a tool in the past or a license-holding veteran. Lastly, we'll cover lessons learned from a year and a half of our immersion into this new capability. First, I want to break down some jargon that may surface during the talk today. Let's start with the one that's in the title of the talk. Remote. Remote means not face-to-face interviews for today. This encompasses everything from Zoom calls with consumers to consumers self-recording a tour of their pantry for your teams. The next term, fuzzy front end, refers to a stage of the product development lifecycle where we don't know what to make, and we align to start with understanding what the end user's needs are before we start developing product ideas. The last term is participatory. It's a research method that provides people with the tools or stimuli to directly share attitudes, beliefs, feelings, needs, wishes, or barriers. This could involve giving a truck driver 10 stickers to make talking about their emotions more comfortable, or asking teenagers to create a 5-minute play on the hardest parts of waking up in the morning. So what happened to face-to-face qualitative research? Traditional face-to-face qualitative research came to a full stop for Reckitt's teams. Company travel is frozen, and all of our projects that have been aligned to be conducted via in-person research in foreign or local markets were put on hold until further notice. Whether you managed a research facility, moderated interviews, or briefed agencies, we all were forced to adapt. Remote research was one of the new tools innovation teams turned to. Here are a few questions that we found Reckitt employees asking to explore how they could best leverage this new way of conducting research. What data can people share from the comfort of their homes? And when are people most willing to share data when outside their home? Now I'm going to break down how many teams at Reckitt experienced consumer and customer research before and during the pandemic. I think it's important to understand the pros and cons of both remote and face-to-face research to define what will work best for your teams once society reopens. Before the pandemic, face-to-face was the preferred way of obtaining deep qualitative human truths. Teams were comfortable taking the time to build and conduct rigorous in-home or in-facility research face-to-face because they knew they'd get a comprehensive textbook of insights that had lived in the organization for multiple years. During the pandemic, remote research was the preferred way of quickly answering qualitative human-centered questions that came up on a weekly basis for projects. Teams knew they could get a video clip of a consumer answering their question overnight to use in tomorrow's presentation to a senior leader to help obtain sign-off on a next steps plan. Now let's take a deeper dive into how aspects of qualitative research were before the pandemic versus how they've been during the pandemic. Let's start with ramp-up time. Before the pandemic, research teams took 1 to 2 months to plan rigorous methodologies and recruit research participants available for multiple hour-long in-person interviews. During the pandemic, research teams were often briefed a few days before outputs were needed and had hours to launch a study. The time available for planning research greatly impacts the wider team's ability to be involved in more meticulous aspects of studies, like hand-selecting research participants. This is a great example of a trade-off decision to discuss when planning in-person, remote, or a hybrid approach to research as society reopens. What about the cadence of qualitative research? For deep dives into consumers' current and desired experiences, teams used to conduct semi-annual studies before the pandemic due to the associated costs, resources, and time required for in-person consumer work. During the pandemic, remote research was often conducted at a monthly, if not weekly cadence. Some teams stopped planning for research all together and requested studies as questions came up on their projects, as they knew the turnaround time needs to be done within a few days. Exploring a white space brand new to your business may require a different amount of time dedicated to rigor than a pulse check on your brand's core products that your team breathes day in and day out. Now let's talk about participation during fieldwork. The travel team was always limited by budget, time, or politics before the pandemic. Focus group rooms in nearby towns had limits for backroom attendance, and attending in-home interviews in a foreign market was often only feasible for the researcher and project funder. During the pandemic, the concept of a 30 or 1,000 plus extended team participating in research emerged. Whether it was playing a consumer video during a presentation for a close-knit project team, or including a consumer video in an email across the organization, remote research enabled much larger groups of people to immerse themselves in the direct conversations with consumers. It is impossible to replace the intimacy of research in a consumer's home or shopping alongside them at a local store, but it is also impossible to take an entire organization to in-person consumer research once a month. Let's talk about co-creation. Before the pandemic, consumers were given physical prototypes to use and provide immediate feedback on, like a new candy flavor or car infotainment control system being considered for a new product launch. During the pandemic, it was very costly to send consumers all over the world product samples, and teams often relied on building digital experiences. This meant that early packaging prototypes may be shared as a 3D rendering that consumers can rotate on their computer or smartphone screens. But this also encouraged teams to build more realistic digital environments for consumers to share feedback on earlier on both new brand and product ideas. These digital prototypes ranged from a Facebook advertisement to a live website. Though multi-sensorial experiences are quite challenging to ask consumers to project or dream without the actual multi-sensorial stimuli to build from, live, in the wild, digital environments can make concept building and refinement more accurate. Now let's talk about interaction with participants. Before the pandemic, asking follow-up questions was essential to running a successful interview. It was the norm and incomprehensible to not conduct in-person qual before prioritizing or validating ideas quantitatively. During the pandemic, teams often relied on self-documented studies for speed because they could not keep up with a higher number of project requests coming in. Conducting in-depth interviews, even though feasible via Zoom or phones, happen less frequently and only when urgently needed for categories very new to the organization. The type of interaction with consumers may end up being dictated by both the cadence of research your team wants to conduct and the type of stimuli your team needs consumers to interact with. What used to have to be in person may be a test you can run more frequently remotely, or altogether, it may be something that still lacks the depth and accuracy when done remotely and relies on face-to-face environments for conducting research there. So how about outputs? Before the pandemic, teams dedicated significant portions of their annual budget to jet setting for global consumer research initiatives, and they expected reports that represented the amount of time that went into those projects. These outputs were internally held as sacred textbooks that were reinforced and referenced back to in meetings for years after a project. They were expected to be extremely detailed, capable of answering business questions that may merge with future trends. During the pandemic, teams asking for overnight research had different expectations and tolerances for making insights actionable. Teams leaned heavily on rewatchable consumer highlight reel videos to immerse teams firsthand into consumers' current and desired experiences. Qualitative deliverables should always help teams take a deep dive into the heartbeat of the consumer. Storytelling is an art and will continue to require teams to try new ways of making consumer learnings actionable for teams. Video editing and video making has been added as another tool researchers can leverage to navigate and shape organizations' long-standing beliefs about consumers. It is not a replacement for reports, but will likely shape how teams communicate and influence key business decisions. So where is remote research going in the wake of a hygiene pandemic? As society reopens, there will be shifted and still shifting social norms. Many of us, whether familiar or unfamiliar with remote research, were stuck fully relying on it to conduct research during the pandemic and have a better understanding of when it best suits our teams, customers, and consumers. Here are a few questions we can discuss with our organizations or customers to gauge what role remote research can best play as regions reopen. How do consumers prefer to engage in front-end research? How comfortable are consumers inviting us back into their homes? When does remote research best support our business needs? So how do we get there? Now I'm going to share 3 provocations to challenge us to integrate remote research into our work routines, whether we're just learning how to crawl, beginning to walk, or comfortable running full steam ahead. I'll bring to life the value of each provocation with example video outputs from these best practices. For those just being introduced to remote research, your first best practice should be starting your meetings with real videos from your users. Consumer insights are a lot more believable when you hear them straight from the consumer. Teams have hierarchy and politics. People have implicit biases. Sharing videos directly from consumers removes the baggage that comes with a human presenter. User videos remove researchers from the game of telephone and help teams build empathy. How might your team collect consumer quotes and moments that speak for themselves?
Okay, so this is the toothpaste that I have. As you can see, I don't have a lot left. I've been using a lot of it actually. But this is a watermelon flavor. And I went with this because I wanted something other than mint. I get tired of having mint flavored or spearmint flavored toothpaste, and I wanted something out of the box. And so that's why I went with this one. The flavor is sweet. It doesn't really taste like watermelon, but to be fair, I didn't think it would. It's sweet. It almost makes me feel like I'm brushing my teeth with like fruit juice.
We may not believe in niche emerging trends becoming mass, like sweet, fruity toothpaste flavors for adults, but hearing firsthand from an individual that is already practicing a behavior can challenge our organization's attitudes towards a trend having business potential. For those who are familiar but not seasoned veterans with remote research, starting a consumer closeness program is a great way to build more shared value across your organization. Putting time on your team's calendars, whether project related or just for category immersion, ensures that your wider team shares firsthand empathy with who you are building experiences for. Face-to-face, in-home interviews were very expensive and timely, often limiting the number of people that could attend fieldwork and the frequency in which it could be conducted. Building an affordable virtual immersion program will keep your wider team's consumer or customer pulse more up to date. How might your team more consistently get a pulse check on people's attitudes, beliefs, and awareness of your brand?
Here's the floss. I'm going to coat it with cinnamon. Okay. As you can see, it's coated with the cinnamon. Let's flip this around. Tastes like cinnamon. I don't mind it, actually. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the cinnamon toothpicks that you used to get when we were kids. I think they were called hot sticks. So kind of that type of taste. Just trying to get a little bit more flavor there. But I don't like the grittiness of the actual cinnamon. The flavor is nice, but I would like the cinnamon variety, I think. I don't prefer the grit, like I said, of the cinnamon, but I do like the flavor of the cinnamon, so I think I would enjoy the cinnamon flavored flossers if that was an option.
The decision-making process is very different when everyone has the chance to ask a consumer a follow-up question. Co-creating a new floss flavor with consumers live is very different from only being brought up to speed on the results of research the day the team has to align on a decision. Lastly, go live as early as possible. The term proto-selling means test your ideas in real environments before you overinvest time and resources into launching those products or services. Digital research can help you observe and learn how people experience a website or rendering of a 3D package, and how this change may help or harm your brand's equity before you launch that idea. How might your team gather real feedback on your new launches before you launch them?
Pop-ups are so annoying. Meet the world's only personalized teeth whitening kit. Forget to skip the dentist. At home, custom teeth whitening powered. I really don't care. Please go away. Style and obviously teeth whitening looks pretty good. So I think I'd probably unlock my offer because I'd be interested. Oh, interesting. That's Flynn from Tangled. I'm not sure the relevance, but let's get started anyway. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand why they need my name to continue, but that's fine. Let's pretend that I've done that. What gender did you identify as? Again, I don't really understand why they need to know my gender. Why is that relevant for teeth whitening? I mean, but we'll just go with it. When's my birthday? Okay, so I'm not sure I'd be that comfortable providing my birthday at this stage. They haven't really said exactly what the offer is, and I don't really know exactly what I'm signing up for. But I'll progress through. How often for middle ground there? Okay, so I kind of get the relevance of this quiz, but I'm still not totally sure what exactly I'm getting here. I kind of expected to get the offer and then be taken through the quiz because they mentioned the quiz on the homepage, I think. And I'm not entirely sure of the relevance of all of these questions. It's not quite what I expected. I'm just going to say no. No. Maybe makes me trust the brand a little bit less. I'm not. I just want people to be upfront and transparent, and then I'm happy to provide details if I know what it's for. But I still don't really know what I'm signing up for here and what they're going to use my details for, anything like that. So that would be useful to know.
Asking someone to select their willingness to create an online account on a 30-question survey is very different from observing how someone behaves in a digital environment you've created with a new create an account to view results feature. So in lessons learned, I want to summarize that remote research tools were not designed to replace the face-to-face experience of a participatory research methodology, but it is a new way to think about building consumer closeness, increase speed, cadence, recency, and vulnerability with the people that we design products for. Let's shift from being a liaison between people interacting with our brands and our organization's teams to being promoters firsthand of the complaints and requests that consumers have directly to our teams. Leaning into this tool for research asks with shorter timelines has enabled me in my role to shift from being a speaker for people's needs and wishes to being a promoter for what they say firsthand. Thank you for joining today's talk, Where is Remote Research Going? Now we'll be moving to the Q&A. Please send over any questions you have on today's talk in the chat, and I look forward to our future discussion. Thanks again. Speak soon.